mocked and dismissed. The first contact should have been a triumph for humanity, a moment to prove that our species had finally stepped into the galactic stage. Instead, it was a humiliation. The Xylarian fleet appeared suddenly, massive silver arcs suspended in orbit around Earth, their surfaces shimmering with technology humanity could barely comprehend. A single broadcast echoed across every frequency, translated in every language. Primitive species. Barely intelligent. Submit or perish. Panic did not sweep the planet. Not yet. From Tokyo to New York, Nairobi to Sao Paulo, humanity's leaders convened emergency councils. Scientists huddled over equations and intercepted signals. Engineers pored over schematics, trying to reverse engineer alien devices. And civilians, artists, coders, mechanics, found ways to contribute, improvising solutions that no machine could predict. The world watched as humanity responded, not with trembling submission, but with defiance. Satellites intercepted Xylarian communications, revealing small flaws in their encryption protocols. Analysts discovered that the aliens' supposedly flawless systems were rigid, slow to adapt, vulnerable to unpredictable interference. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and survived. The lesson had been learned. Desperation breeds ingenuity. Humor became a weapon, too. Social media exploded with memes mocking the Xylarian threats, viral videos lampooning their haughty broadcast. Children drew aliens with big heads and tiny hands. News anchors joked on live television, juxtaposing images of Earth cities with captions like, "Primitive species." Indeed. The laughter did more than lighten the mood. It unified a species under threat, reminding everyone that fear was only one possible response. Behind the laughter, serious work unfolded. Orbital defenses were strengthened, bunkers converted into research labs, AI networks optimized to predict alien movements. Every innovation, every improvised weapon, every clever hack was a statement. Humans were not helpless. Then came the first act of rebellion. A hacked Xylarian communications satellite, commandeered by a team of engineers and hackers, broadcast Earth's collective message directly to the alien fleet. No threats, no pleas, just defiance. We will not kneel. For a moment, the Xylarians faltered. Their command structure, so certain of its superiority, struggled to process a species that refused to submit. What they saw as primitive now became dangerously unpredictable. Humanity had sent its first warning. Underestimating us would be a mistake. By the end of the week, Earth had transformed. The planet was alive with activity. Scientists in orbital labs, engineers in underground facilities, volunteers organizing logistics and strategy. The term primitive was no longer an insult, it was a challenge. And humanity, as a species, was beginning to rise to it. The Xylarian fleet hung above, unaware that the species it mocked was already preparing to become the nightmare it would never forget. Turning the tables, the Xylarian response was swift and brutal. Within days, their fleet began orbital maneuvers, positioning massive warships around Earth like predatory birds encircling prey. Their weapons systems glimmered with lethal precision, capable of leveling cities in an instant. Yet humanity did not panic. Instead, the planet braced, not for surrender, but for war. Conventional defenses would have failed. Human engineers and strategists realized quickly that brute force could not match the Xylarians' technology. Instead, they embraced unpredictability. Fleets were dispersed into smaller units, decoy satellites were launched, and improvised electromagnetic pulses were deployed to confuse alien sensors. Earth's cities became laboratories of ingenuity. Engineers turned solar arrays into energy weapons, while hobbyists and volunteers built drones that could swarm and disable alien machinery. Ordinary materials, magnetic coils, mirrors, even industrial cranes, were repurposed into improvised defense systems. Humanity's greatest advantage was creativity, a weapon no algorithm could anticipate. Hacker networks infiltrated Xylarian communications, planting false data, scrambling coordinates, and feeding misinformation directly into alien command channels. Every human action, no matter how small, became part of a larger strategy. Make the invaders doubt their superiority, make them fear the unpredictable. The first major victory came unexpectedly. A Xylarian battle cruiser, the size of a small city and considered invincible, was destroyed by a combination of improvised orbital traps and clever sabotage. Human drones had infiltrated its maintenance bays, disabled critical systems, and delivered a pulse that crippled its energy core. The alien ship erupted in a blinding flare, leaving the fleet stunned and humiliated. Humanity celebrated, but not with arrogance. There was no time for complacency. Instead, the victory reinforced a critical lesson. Technology alone did not determine the outcome of war. Adaptability, intuition, and the ability to exploit an enemy's rigid thinking could turn the tide. Across Earth, coordination intensified. Underground bunkers buzzed with strategy sessions. Orbital labs synchronized with ground forces. Civilian volunteers became scouts, engineers, and communications specialists. Every person had a role, every idea mattered. The species that the Xylarians had called primitive was demonstrating its lethal potential. By the chapter's end, the first cracks appeared in the Xylarian confidence. Their precise calculations and rigid strategies were undone by human improvisation. The aliens had underestimated unpredictability, creativity, and courage, the very traits they had mocked. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive, had begun to turn the tables, showing the galaxy that the real danger was not technological superiority, but the ingenuity and indomitable will of an underestimated species. Above the planet, the Xylarian fleet hovered, confused and increasingly wary. For the first time, they understood that humans were more than a challenge. They were a threat that refused to be contained. And on Earth, a species that had been mocked as primitive was awakening to its true power. The nightmare emerges. The Xylarian fleet, once confident and commanding, was now reeling. Their initial attacks had been thwarted by human ingenuity, and their rigid command protocols were ill-suited to the chaos unfolding. In response, they turned to psychological warfare, broadcasting ominous threats, staging false victories, and attempting to fracture humanity's unity with fear and misinformation. But humans were ready. Years of history had taught them to survive the impossible. They anticipated the psychological assaults, intercepting broadcasts and feeding back false information that made the Xylarians doubt their own intelligence networks. The once mighty invaders were now trapped in a web of deception spun by the species they had dismissed as primitive. Humanity struck next, and the attacks were no longer defensive. They were strategic, surgical, and unpredictable. Orbital platforms fired guided strikes at supply convoys, while elite teams infiltrated Xylarian ships and installations. Colonies occupied by the aliens rebelled, inspired by humans' bold actions and newfound reputation. Every victory sent a ripple through the fleet, undermining morale and spreading fear. The true advantage lay not in weaponry, but in human adaptability. The Xylarians were powerful, but rigid. Their strategies relied on predictability and control. Humans, by contrast, were fluid, improvisational, and decentralized. Leaders in Earth command centers coordinated with engineers in orbital labs, while volunteer networks relayed intelligence in real time. Humans exploited the gaps that alien hubris had left open. The turning point came with an audacious infiltration operation. Using modified drones, stealth technology, and human cunning, a team penetrated the Xylarian flagship, the nerve center of the alien fleet. Systems that were thought unbreachable fell to improvised hacks and clever misdirection. Communication grids were sabotaged, navigation systems scrambled, and the flagship was thrown into chaos. For the first time, the Xylarian High Command experienced vulnerability on a scale they had never imagined. The psychological impact was immediate. Across the fleet, confusion spread. Alien officers second-guessed orders, and previously coordinated strikes faltered. Humans were no longer a nuisance. They were a nightmare. The species they had mocked as primitive now dictated the tempo of the battle, controlling when, where, and how engagements occurred. By the end of the chapter, humanity had solidified its reputation as unpredictable and lethal. Across Earth, celebrations were quiet but resolute. There was still work to be done, and no one underestimated the Xylarians' capacity for retaliation. Yet one truth had become undeniable. The species dismissed as primitive had transformed into a force the galaxy could not ignore. From the shadows of mockery, humanity had risen, exploiting every weakness, every rigid procedure, and every assumption the Xylarians had made. The nightmare had only just begun, and it was coming from the unlikeliest of sources, a species called human. Humanity's reckoning. With the Xylarian fleet in disarray, humanity seized the initiative. The species once mocked as primitive had become a force of strategy, adaptability, and relentless ingenuity. Every strike was deliberate, every action calculated to exploit the invaders' confusion. Occupied colonies rose in rebellion, cutting supply lines and sabotaging alien installations from within. Human ingenuity now guided the fate of the galaxy's most technologically advanced species. Earth's forces, now fully coordinated, combined orbital strikes, ground operations, and cyber warfare in a synchronized assault. Orbital platforms disabled weapons arrays while elite squads infiltrated ships, using improvised tools and clever tactics to cripple critical systems. Drone swarms, originally crude prototypes, overwhelmed advanced Xylarian defenses. Where alien technology relied on predictability, humans relied on adaptability, on creativity born from necessity. The climax unfolded in the heart of the Xylarian command. Humans, anticipating every protocol, struck with precision. High-ranking officers were neutralized, communication grids severed, and navigation systems corrupted. The flagship, once a symbol of Xylarian dominance, was rendered inoperative by a combination of human cunning and relentless pressure. The fleet, leaderless and panicked, scattered in confusion. Across the galaxy, observers took note. Other civilizations, once passive or dismissive, now watched a species rise from mocked inferiority to tactical brilliance. Humanity had proven that technological superiority alone does not determine victory. Ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to defy expectation were far deadlier than the Xylarians had imagined. The Xylarian High Command, humbled and fractured, retreated, their arrogance replaced by fear. They now understood that the species they had derided as primitive could not only survive but dominate when provoked. Humanity had rewritten the rules of engagement. The galaxy would no longer underestimate Earth. On Earth, victory was quiet but resolute. Leaders convened to consolidate liberated colonies, rebuild systems disrupted by the conflict, and honor those who had fought. Scientists and engineers celebrated breakthroughs born from necessity, while civilians, who had become integral to the war effort, found pride in the role their creativity had played. The planet, once threatened, now stood as a beacon of resilience and ingenuity. Finally, humanity sent a message to the retreating Xylarian remnants. No species, regardless of technological superiority, should underestimate those they call primitive. Across the stars, humans had transformed from prey to predator, from joke to nightmare. The story closed with Earth united, colonies freed, and humanity's reputation irrevocably changed. The species once mocked as backward, unpredictable, and primitive had become a nightmare that would echo across the galaxy. The Xylarian Empire had learned a lesson too late. Intelligence, creativity, and unyielding were our weapons far more powerful than any fleet. From the shadows of scorn, humanity had emerged victorious, leaving the galaxy with one undeniable truth: never underestimate a species determined to survive and to fight back.